For 10,000 years did the bright empire of Melniboné rule the world by virtue of her sorcerer kings, her dragon hordes, and her golden battle barges. From Imrryr, the dreaming city, capital of the island of Melniboné, the power of the bright emperors radiated over all the lands of mankind. Though the Melnibonéans were not true men themselves. They were tall, with eldritch features. They were proud, malicious, sensitive, and artistic, with a vast knowledge of sorcery. They were familiar with many of the supernatural realms of the higher worlds, and knew that the wonders of Earth could not compare with those of the higher worlds. They regarded their late-born cousins of the young kingdoms with arrogant contempt, reckoning them fit only to be plundered or enslaved. But at last, after 100 centuries, Melniboné's power began to wane as she was shaken by the casting of frightful runes, attacked by powers even greater than she, until all that was left of the bright empire was the isle itself and its single city, Imrryr, still strong, still feared, still the mercantile capital of the world, but no longer the glorious power she had been. And so it might have remained, save that it was not destiny's way to have it so. For the next few centuries, which was called the Age of the Young Kingdoms, petty empires rose and fell, and new nations had their moments of power. Sheegoth, Naidak, Salim, Ilmaora, and others. And then came a great movement upon the earth and above it. The destiny of men and gods was hammered out upon the forge of fate, and monstrous wars were brewed and mighty deeds performed. And during this time, there rose up many heroes. Chief of these was Elric, last ruler of Melniboné, who bore the rune-carved black sword, Stormbringer. Hero, perhaps, is not the proper term for Elric, for it was he who turned against his own line and led the Sea Lords of the Young Kingdoms in their mighty attack upon Imrryr. An attack which resulted in Imrryr's destruction, but also theirs. It was all part of fate's plan, though Elric was not to learn this for many years. Elric of Melniboné, proud prince of ruins, last lord of a dying race, became a wanderer, loathed and feared throughout the lands of the Young Kingdoms. Elric of the Black Sword, sorcerer and slayer of kin, despoiler of his homeland, crimson-eyed albino, who had within him a greater destiny than he knew. Now there was a certain sorcerer of Pantang called Theleb Ka'ana. Elric, whose vengeful emotions had already brought much grief to himself and others, bore a grudge against the sorcerer, and spent 3 years in pursuit of him, until he was at last tracked to Bakshan, a city rich enough to make all the other cities of the northeast seem poor, where, in a melancholy adventure, he was slain at last. Short-statured Moonglim of the red hair and wide grin wanted to head southeast for the peaceful lands of Ilmaora, but Elric was drawn back to the southern continent, where he spent the winter squandering his treasure in the cities of Argamiliar, seeking an impossible consolation. Welcome, friends, to Breakfast in the Ruins, a Michael Moorcock-flavoured podcast. On this show, Derek, AKA Imrryr, is back to take a look at one of the more obscure entries into the canon of the tales of the Pale Prince of Ruins, Elric of Melniboné. The Jade Man's Eyes is an interesting entry into the Elric sequence, as it predates the reorganisation of the Elric tales in the 1970s, when they were arranged in narrative chronology, with the brand new Elric of Melniboné novel kicking them off. It was included in that sequence in an altered form as the third part of The Sailor on the Seas of Fate. We'll talk about some of the obvious differences as we go. To my knowledge, this version of the story in its original form was only published in the Lynn Carter edited anthology series Flashing Swords in Volume 2 in 1973, and, the same year, as a neat little chapbook with a Jim Cawthorne cover by the legendary Brighton fixture for freaks, heads and sci-fi and fantasy fans, the Unicorn Bookshop. And when you consider how many times these tales have been reprinted over the years, that makes it pretty interesting. Lynn Carter's Flashing Swords anthologies went for 5 volumes between 1973 and 1981. It was brought back very briefly a few years ago, but after some of the contributing authors read the foreword by editor Robert M. Price, they retracted the permissions for the stories. Subsequently, the publishers pulled the book and that was that.
I won't go into the details, but Price, well known by folks into Lovecraft and surrounding discourse, has repeatedly outed himself and his beliefs over the years, and this was another example. You can find extracts from his foreword online, so I won't labour them here, other than to say, what a cock. But the link art edited volumes were a cool way for readers to discover a range of authors and their most enduring characters. Fritz Leiber, Jack Vance, Paul Anderson, John Jakes, and tons of others, including Moorcock, of course. And in Flashing Swords 4, there's another Elric story, The Lands Beyond the World, another tale that will be revised and repackaged as part of Sailor on the Seas of Fate. So another one for some further investigation down the line, and perhaps we'll look at some of the other stories in the Flashing Swords anthologies along the way. But for now, we're interested in the Jade Man's Eyes, and it is time to disembark. So, finish your mug of breakfast wine, flip the landlord, a Melnibonean dragon, and join Derek and me as we cross the boiling sea to seek out the Jade Man's Eyes.
Welcome back, Derek, to Derry and Toms. We've just saying it's been a while. It's been a year since we did options. Lovely to have you back.
I'm glad to be back.
Fabulous. But this time does fly, doesn't it?
I know.
A whole year. We were just coming up on the 6th birthday episode. I can't believe it. 120 something.
6 years of me doing Imrryr too. I mean, we share a birthday.
yeah. It's crazy, isn't it? Yeah. Bloody hell, the time is absolutely slinging by. And of course, we're recording this. By the time this comes out, we'll probably be slap in the middle of the Christmas period. So, in a way, this is kind of a festive episode, but it's just after 2 p.m. for you, 7 p.m. for me. I can't promise to have anything particularly festivity-themed beyond some odd beers, as usual. Any beverages for you today? Are you
no,
an afternoon drinker? Just water. That's very sensible. I probably should have taken a leaf out of your book, actually, because I feel pretty rotten today as a result of having a couple last night, which is why I'm not drinking any 12% Imperial Stouts or Porters. I'm going to keep it very, very sensible. So I'm going to kick off with a Kirkstall Infinity Dragon, Dragon Fruit, Yuzu, and Peach Pale Ale. Yeah.
I mean that doesn't sound too casual, but sure.
Yeah. It's a gentle 4.6%, so I'm going to enjoy that very much. But what have you been up to, and what's going on in the world of Imrryr?
Just constantly making music. It's kind of a steady flow of output that's been coming out. I actually, coming into this year, I had told myself I would try and pull back a little.
Yeah.
And I failed at that. I probably released more this year than I have in a while, so...
Yeah, I mean, you've always been prolific, haven't you?
Yeah.
But crikey.
I think a lot of the writing of music is, therapeutic, and stuff's been rough. Yep. So I've needed more therapy, I guess.
Yeah.
So
you've been doing
thoughts.
some collaborations as well, haven't you?
Yeah, a few. I just had a remix come out this past Friday, which would have been the 5th of December, but that was with this band, Am I in Trouble? I did a remix of one of their songs alongside Void Scan, who is a new friend of mine, a new pal.
Love Void Scan.
He's great. He's mastered a couple of and done some mixing for me lately too. I finally started branching out and having someone help me with some of the production side of things. And I'm a fan of his music, and he's been great to work with. And it's all people I met through that Ampwall community, that website. So
right, I've seen you link into Ampwall. Just for an old Luddite like me, who can just about cope with one version of anything, including portals to buy music. What is Ampwall?
I mean, it's more or less a direct competitor to Bandcamp.
Right.
It is much more positive in its relationship with its artists, though. It's the payout is more fair, like the fees they take out of your transactions. It's kind of like the idea of Bandcamp Friday being such a big thing around Bandcamp. It's just on Ampwall, it's like the equivalent of that every day. It's not a big deal. Like you really do. There's a little button you click at checkout where you can just cover an artist fee, and it's a very nominal amount for the most part. And people just tend to click it, and you get your full, payout of the purchase. And the website's great. The integration they have a lot of art credit features that is very nice, because I don't know, kind of album art is super important to music, and it kind of falls by the wayside over on Bandcamp. And this, you can feature like links to artists and then actual artists' can have pages on Ampwall. It's very cool. A lot of really nice stuff going on there.
Yeah, I'm going to have to check Ampwall out now because I've seen you refer to it a few times and I really need to pull my finger out.
I put out a couple exclusive
If it's better for artists,
albums.
then I need to lean away from Bandcamp and start looking at Ampwall instead.
For sure.
Well, that's great. You know what? We are here. Well, probably need to explain a little bit about why we ended up doing what we're about to do, because we've talked a few times about doing something by Larry Niven. And you probably can't quite see it. Yeah, you probably can't quite see it because I think it's just off to the side. But my Larry Niven books are just behind me here on the shelf, and they've always been with me, most of which I got off Pops. We talked about doing The Moat in God's Eye, but I got intimidated by the scale of it. So we thought, well, why not Ringworld? Let's do Ringworld. And then, dear listeners, I'm going to show Derek my original Golanx SF Yellow Jacket cover of my Ringworld book that I got off Pops, and interestingly, it's got a Kingston upon Hull City Library's ticket in the beginning. It was a hospital services library book, probably from Hull Royal Infirmary in the early 70s. Whether Pops nicked it from Hull Royal Infirmary or whether he got it from a second-hand bookshop, I've absolutely no idea. But the binding, I mean, it's pretty foxed and not in great condition anymore, and the binding started to crack as I was reading it. So there was two things. One is it was longer than I remembered. I never got far enough into it. And the other thing is, as I was reading it, the spine started to crack, and I didn't want it to fall to pieces. So I popped it back on my shelf, dropped you a line, and we thought, right, what can we do? I suggested potentially, would there be a one-shit book we both had? And you said, I do not have any one-shit books. Although that's not necessarily true, because...
That's not true. I was just being a jerk.
The Jade Man's Eyes is a one-shit book, because it's a particularly short novella. So I'll just get this back on the shelf. And it's a Moorcock novella that's got quite an interesting history. We both happen to have a copy. So we agreed, you know what, why not do a bit of Elric? This might be your first Moorcock on the podcast, mightn't it?
Well, no, because we did Black Corridor. This is my first Elric.
Oh, of course we did the Black Corridor. Of course we did. Yeah, we did the Black Corridor, we did Options. What else have we done? Oh, I can't remember. It'll all come back to me. 120-something episodes. I'm starting to forget what I have and haven't done. In fact, even as I was reading this, because we've done Elric stories in a slightly odd order, and there's a reference to My Sheller, I was thinking, we've done a story with My Sheller, haven't we? And I was thinking, who did I do it with? And what story was it? And I can't remember. I honestly can't remember. We've definitely, I'm sure we've done it, because I have the memory of laughing about Elric and My Sheller's fate, because, you know, it's an Elric story, isn't it? But anyway, we're doing The Jade Man's Eyes, which was published by Unicorn Fantasy in 1973. And it's quite a pretty little novella, I think, with the James Cawthorne cover, which I like very much. But do you know much about how this got published?
Well, actually, I had been reading about it. It was sort of readapted, right, and put into
Yeah. So it was first published by Unicorn, and then it ended up getting printed in Flashing Swords 2.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
The edit by Lynn Carter, the Swordsman and what are they called? Saga, wasn't it? The Swordsman and Wizard. I can't fucking remember what they're called. But a guild or a convention of sci-fi and fantasy authors who were into sword and sorcery, with people like Spraderkamp, Lynn Carter, Fritz Leiber, and Moorcock joined. And there's another Brack story in here, a John Jakes Brack story. But The Jade Man's Eyes is in there. And it's funny because it was first published in 1973 as this chapbook by the Unicorn Bookshop in Brighton, in the UK, which seems a bit weird, a bookshop having just like a print run or something, but it turns out they printed quite a few. So for a chapbook published by a bookshop 52 years ago, you would think this would be quite collectible, but they're actually still fairly easy to come by, and for a fairly reasonable price. And it's quite a nice edition too, so that's quite surprising. But I looked into this. Sorry, go on.
I think for you, maybe, but I was looking this up. This is like going for $90 in the United States.
Really? Oh,
yeah.
Interesting. Because I had a look earlier, because I was thinking, I remember picking a couple of these up a while back and sending them out to patron demons. And I think I was picking up for like 15, 20 quid. And I had a look, and once again, in the UK, there's a couple
kicking around for 15, 20, 25 quid. So they must have printed a lot of these for them still to be flying around like that. But this Unicorn bookshop in Brighton, it was opened in 1967 by an American from San Francisco called Bill Butler and his partner Mike Hughes. And it was a proper head shop selling all kinds of hippie paraphernalia, literature, beat poetry. It was an outlet for left-leaning materials and stuff considered obscene by the establishment. So, as was generally the way with a lot of these things, because the British government and councils particularly, and the police, had a real hard-on for people doing these things. There were, the well-publicised trials of magazines, and one of the guys behind Savoy Publishing, and they got into regular bother from the police and had various legal troubles. So Butler ended up eventually leaving the business, moved to a commune in Wales, and then sadly passed away in 1979. And the bookshop itself was done by 1975. But I was looking it up, and if you search Unicorn Bookshop Brighton, there are some really, really good blogs and articles that talk about its history. I also found a Brighton and Hove message board, like forum for all things Brightonian, that has a brief thread talking about memories of the Unicorn. In 2006, message boards, right? In 2006, someone posted this. They said, I spent some of the happiest days of my life at the Unicorn between 1969 and late 1972. Bill and Michael were wonderful, generous hosts, and we talked about just about everything, not least the Olympia Press, Henry Miller, early John Updike, and censorship. I bought the first edition of T.S. Eliot's Wasteland, facsimile and transcripts from them in April 1972 for £5, which was getting on for a couple of weeks' rent in those far-off golden days, and I'm looking at it again with much nostalgia at this very moment. Oh, that's nice, isn't it? Yeah, it's amazing. None of the bookshops I used to frequent as a kid survived the 90s, I don't think. But Butler also published stuff under his Unicorn label by Jack Kerouac, William Burroughs, and J.G. Ballard as well. So they actually knocked out quite a few. So yeah, it's quite an interesting little bit of Moorcockiana, is the Jade Man's Eyes.
Were the books like official publications, or was it sort of like a...
Yeah, so I think this was licensed, authorised by Moorcock, but apparently the J.G. Ballard one wasn't. They just slipped that one out. Exactly what the story behind that is, I really don't know. Because Mike himself, he said he doesn't really remember exactly when he wrote this story, even though it was published for the first time in 73. He said he might have been the late 60s and it just kicked around for a while. Because, of course, I suppose if you think about where Mike is in the late 60s, he's writing the Coram trilogy. First Coram trilogy is writing the first series of Hawk Moon books, as well as lots and lots of other things. So maybe just having a standalone 70-odd page Elric story that didn't naturally have a book to be slotted into as a fix-up, because, of course, Stealer and Souls and Stormbringer and even The Sleeping Sorceress later were all fix-ups. And maybe it just didn't find a natural home at that point, but it did eventually, of course, and you referred to it. It got revised, and it ends up in the 70s when Grafton / Panther in the UK, I can't remember which one it was, and Daw in the United States rearrange and retitle the stories into those 6 core Elric books, and the Jade Man's Eyes ends up being revised and becoming the last third of The Sailor on the Seas of Fate, relabelled Sailing to the Past. Moongloom is replaced by Count Smeog and Baldhead. The initial framing of the story to get it kicked off is changed, because the brilliant thing about this is, which I always love, it kicks off with them arriving in town trying to find a pub and the skint, and they need some money. That's a classic sword and sorcery kickoff for a pair, isn't it? It's I love that stuff, and quite apart from anything else, I like Moongloom, so I'm happy to have him back.
Huge Moongloom fan.
Yeah, he's brilliant, isn't he? And he gets some really lovely moments in this too. He's not in it a huge amount. You don't get a huge amount of dialogue, but it's really meaningful.
I particularly like the early on, which ended up having a purpose later on at the end of the book. But when he just asks, "Oh, why can't you just magic us some money?" Yeah. It's like like the implied all the time you spent with this conjurer of magic. That's the first time you thought of like,
and I was just like, don't work that way. Yeah, I mean, we will see in this story that Elric's sorcerous powers can be extraordinarily convenient at times and get him out quite a lot of trouble. But no, magicking up a couple of Melnibonian dragons to buy some tucker, no, don't work that way. So let's get into it. Let's have a look at it. So it starts off, actually, funny enough, with a dedication to Philip Drouet, the French artist behind Elric, The Return to Melniboné, which turns out was an unofficial publication that Moorcock never actually agreed to, and they had a bit of a wrangle, a bit of a back and forth, and then they came to an arrangement, an agreement, and it was eventually republished. But I've often wondered about the Return to Melniboné, and funnily enough, I mentioned it briefly on the last Weetabix file, and our friend Mark Hebden dropped me a line and pointed me to a copy on eBay, which is currently going for about 90 quid. And just for a split second, I was like, oh. But then I thought, no, what time of year it is, you really don't need to be dropping 90 quid on a 24-page comic just so you can have a look at it. And as it turns out, it was reprinted anyway a few years ago in a little hardcover collection, so I don't really need it. But I looked it up on Moorcography, and John Davey said this about it. He said, Elric, The Return to Melniboné is a short original graphic novel that remains, despite its comparative irrelevance to the overall series, one of the scarcest and most sought after of Elric books. That's true, because there's another listed on eBay. It's 399 quid. Oh. This is the result of its somewhat checkered history, a saga complex enough to rival Elric's own. It's actually little more than a showcase for the exquisite artwork of Philippe, beginning life in 1966 as a double-spread colour illustration for the only issue of a French magazine, Moi Aussi, with text by Maxim Jakubowski. In 1969, Druyer illustrated an omnibus called Elric the Necromancer, and in 1972, some of this, a new artwork, was put into a 21-piece portfolio as the Saga of Elric the Necromancer, this time with text by Michael Demuth. All this work up until then was unauthorised, but when the portfolio was reprinted and bound in the UK as Elric the Return to Melniboné with text by Moorcock, Druyer threatened to sue. So Moorcock was forced to step in on behalf of the British publishers, pointing out that permission had never been granted for Druyer to draw Elric in the first place. So in order to avoid messy litigation, it was decided to allow the small print run to expire, never to be reprinted. However, a republication was finally agreed. It was made available again in 1997, with minor textual amendments, also restoring its original black and white format, the earlier edition having been printed in a rather lurid and of its time near fluorescent purple. And that's the one that's on eBay at the moment.
Yeah.
And it was later collected alongside James Cawthon's 1976 graphic adaptation of Stormbringer in 2021's Elric the Eternal Champion collection. Ah, John Davey, what a treasure that man is. I don't know if you've ever been on Moorcography, but if you ever want to find out anything about any Moorcock publication, it's all on there. It's fabulous. Yeah, so interesting stuff. So let's get into it, shall we? Let's see what Elric and Moonglum are up to. We get some really nice, efficient, simple Moorcock prose. And funnily enough, I think when Moorcock's writing this, he really is, if he's writing this in the late 60s, it really is a sweet spot, I think, for his writing when it comes to pulpy adventure. All right, let's get my reading specs on.
It is like the perfect pop song equivalent. You know, it's just
yeah,
one sitting, everything you need out of the story, one and done. Nice.
It's snappy, it's got a great rhythm, it hits all the right notes for an Elric story. Yeah. It's great. And if you were jumping into this and reading this for the first time and you didn't know who Moorcock or Elric were, this is a fantastic jumping off point to discover Elric. But similarly, there's enough in here that if you're familiar with Elric, there's enough connections that you can draw and enough callbacks and enough, interesting new little nuggets of information to make it a valuable piece of Elric lore as well. With all the, I won't get into the name of the city yet because we're going to have to argue about pronunciations at some point. Because holy shit, there are so many apostrophes in names in this book.
I just glaze. When words like that in a fantasy book, I do not take the time to suss out the order of letters. I just...
Oh my god, yeah. Right, well, let's have a look anyway. Of all the cities in the Young Kingdoms, the city named Chalal was deemed the most beautiful. Some said that it ranked with Imrryr, the dreaming city of Melniboné, but those who had seen both said that Chalal's beauty was more humane. Chalal had been built on both banks of the River Shah, which ran through the country of Picarade. Picarade? Well, yeah, already struggling out with Picarade, whatever. Laid out by a line of artist kings according to the original conception of Mornir I. Its broad avenues were overlooked by monuments, statues, and widely spaced buildings of singularly delicate architecture. White marble, polished granite, and alabaster shone in the clear, bright air, and there were fine lawns, gardens, and evergreens, fountains and mazes, all designed by the greatest artists of the Young Kingdoms through many generations. Chalal was Picarade's greatest treasure, and for a long while the country had been pauperised to create it. It happened that one springtime 2 strange men came to Chalal. They rode their weary Chazarian horses along the quays of marble and lapis lazuli behind the fast-flowing river. One was very tall, with bone-white skin, crimson eyes and hair the colour of milk, and he carried a huge scabbarded broadsword at his side. The other was short, with red hair, and a sardonic expression on his face. He bore 2 swords, one of which was long and curved, while its mate was scarcely bigger than a dagger. Both the men had evidently been travelling for some time, for their clothes were dusty and their features grimed. They might have been unsuccessful merchants or mercenaries who between wars, but some who saw them enter Chalal recognised the tall man and guessed who his companion was. Those who did recognise the newcomers did not greet their arrival with any pleasure, for Elric of Melniboné was known as a murderer, a traitor, and a killer of his own kin who brought horror and destruction wherever he went. Oh, yeah, that's an interesting introduction for our protagonist. Isn't it? I mean, if you're reading this for the first time, you're thinking, oh, okay, this is a bit different. And again, it's easy to get sucked in because of that simple, effective prose. But Moonglum's whining about having no money, and he says, our purses sag like the stomachs of starved cows, thanks to your extravagance. Which I think is brilliant. Elric gets recognised because it says they were almost halfway across a bridge when Moonglum pointed ahead. A company of horsemen were riding at great speed towards the bridge. They were clad in gilded armour, and heavy white cloaks drifted out from behind them. Their leader had a full helm with a crest of scarlet plumes. His visor was shut and completely hid his face. Politely, Moonglum and Elric drew their own horses aside to let the cavalry pass. The leader acknowledged the action with a salute as he went by and then jerked his helm round to regard Elric, as if in recognition. Then the horseman had ridden past and continued up a broad avenue between chestnut trees whose leaves had just begun to open. That knight must have seen you before, Moonglum said. By the style of his arms he was not of Chalal. I pray he is not one of those who bears a grudge against you. Oh, there are many such, said Elric carelessly, but none has ever managed to satisfy his vengeance. They would be fools to try while you bear the black sword. Aye, Elric sighed and pretended to take an interest in the workmanship of an archway under which they now rode.
He's so bored.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So, really, we're only 2.5 pages in, and already so much established in terms of the world and Elric's place in it. As Elric fans, we know, of course.
Yeah.
But the hints at not only his melancholy and doom, but also that tendency to affectation and a hint of performative indifference are clearly laid out for a new reader. He's like, no, yes, he's a doomed lord, but he's also a pretentious dick. And I love it. His ass. Moorcock was on top of his game at this point. But the lads are so skint, Moonglum suggests to seek employment, but Elric, all he wants to do is sleep and sulk. So, having no money, he decides to sleep in his cloak in a public park. while Moonglum goes looking for gainful employment, which is brilliant. He has a weird dream. Unfortunately, in the middle of the night, some uppity city watch knobheads take offence to his vagrancy. But before he murderises them all, the horseman from the bridge rocks up and de-escalates the situation. This fella is Duke Avon Astran, which is quite a cool name, and he takes him to his plush digs for dinner, and Moonglum's there too, already having been found by Astran's men, and invited over for grub. But there's more to this than a slap-up meal. Avon is a famous and well-travelled adventurer. He has an ancient map, and he wants to find the fabled city of Erlin Kren which there's a really amusing bit where Moonglum, or I can't remember, it's Astron or Moonglum says, oh yeah, you said that much more musically than I could.
Yeah.
It's like, how the
high tone or whatever. Yeah.
How the fuck do you say this musically? Or whatever it was. Bloody Moorcock and his apostrophes. Many more of those coming as well, isn't there? I mean, you know, if you're writing, putting yourself in the head of a writer of fiction, what does this gain by making these things such a bloody mouthful? I know it makes it slightly interesting, but holy shit, it's like trying to read Lovecraft monster names, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that name is what does he call it? The ancient speech of Melniboné. So
yeah, you know, I'm not having it. I think it's just pretentious nonsense. But anyway, Erlin Karen we'll go with. Yeah. Erlin Karen Yeah.
This is like Aya or something.
Yeah. But there's more of them coming. Anyway.
Yeah.
Elric delicately eats his veal. He doesn't sound keen.
Well, he starts with a salad, if you remember.
Oh.
It goes out of his way to point out that he does have a salad.
Several courses, but he does eat veal in gravy as well. So he makes his point, maybe, about having something healthy, then he's straight into the veal and gravy. But Astron suggests the mooted possibility that the Western continent, where it is sited, may have been the original origin of Elric's people. And Elric does get ever so slightly irritated at this, because he says, "You mean Rulin Kren Ah?" Elric pretended with a lack of interest he no longer felt. "Aye, a strange name. You pronounce it more fluently than could I." That's it, fluently, not musically. "It simply means where the high ones meet in the ancient speech of Melniboné." Oh, another interesting thing about this, no accent on the E in this book. So you could easily call it Melniboné.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Which
I've
is
read.
how I had said it.
Yeah.
For a long time,
I did for donkey's years, but then I think it's actually hearing Mocock say it as Melniboné. I don't know. I'm fine with Melniboné because it actually makes the old Thrud the Barbarian character, Elric of Boney Maloney, sound, or was it Eric of Boney Maloney? Can't remember. It's a long time ago. But it is marked on a map. Oh, yes. And Elric cut into a veal in a rich, sweet sauce. It does not exist. It is marked on a map I have. Deliberately, Elric chewed his meat and swallowed it. Deliberately. That's a strange line. Deliberately. This is him. This is him with an affectation again, isn't it?
Yeah.
He's just being a cock.
Yeah. Acting like he doesn't care. He's got to eat before he can.
This map is doubtless a forgery. Astron says, "Perhaps, do you recall anything else of the legend of Rulin Krenar? There is the story of the creature doomed to live." Elric pushed the food aside and poured wine for himself. "The city is said to have received its name because the lords of the higher worlds once met there to decide the rules of the cosmic struggle. They were overheard by the one inhabitant of the city who had not flown when they came. When they discovered him, they doomed him to remain alive forever, carrying the frightful knowledge in his head." I have heard that story too, but the one that interests me is that the inhabitants of Rulin Kren never returned to their city. Instead, they struck northwards and crossed the sea. Some reached an island we now call Sorcerer's Isle, while others went further, blown by a great storm, and came at length to a larger island inhabited by dragons, whose venom caused all it's touched to burn, to Melniboné, in fact. And you wish to test the truth of that story. Your interest is that of a scholar. Duke Avon laughed. "Partly, but my main interest in Rulin Kren is more materialistic. For your ancestors left a great treasure behind them when they fled their city. There are a lot of typos in here. Particularly, they abandoned an image of Ariok, the Lord of Chaos, a monstrous image carved in jade whose eyes were two huge identical gems of a kind unknown anywhere else in all the lands of the earth, jewels from another plane of existence, jewels which could reveal all the secrets of the higher worlds, of the past and the future, of the myriad planes of the cosmos." So that's what he's after. He's after bloody big jewels from a statue. So Elric's unconvinced he's the right man for what seems to be a flimsily reasoned plan, but Astron continues to work on him. It turns out he has the key to convincing him, because he obtained the map from the ruins of Imrryr, the Dreaming City itself. And the map was sealed in an object with a symbol that Elric recognises, but dimly embedded in the wax. So, of course, us Elric nerds, we know the score here. We've read The Dreaming City. We know what went down. So the fact that Astron may not have been part of the invasion force, because he probably would be dead because everybody got killed, but he was brave and adventurous enough to go to the Dreaming City and dig around in the ruins and avoid the people who still dwelt there to nick treasure. So Astron's like a bit of an Indiana Jones type, isn't he? Yeah. It's probably it's quite a unique character in all the Elric books. Evan Astron, I quite like him. Is a decent character, which of course bodes really poorly for his longevity.
And he warns him though.
It does, yeah. Oh, it does. And Moonglum, he's thoroughly miserable about the whole prospect because he doesn't want to go
he also
to a
knows
weird
what's
jungle.
coming.
Yeah, he don't want to go to a weird jungle on the far side of the world looking for ancient cities. But again, it's so neatly and effectively constructed for both Elric appreciators and new readers alike. It's great. It's great. Chapter 2, they're set off on a ship, and off they go. Elric sulks and moons over the late Marshalla of the Dawn, his most recent dead lady friend. They cross the boiling sea, losing a few sailors to the heat. Bless them. These sailors are just red shirts, aren't they?
Yeah.
They are hopeless red shirts, this entire story. Not one of them even gets a name. beyond Astran, we don't even find out who the first mate is. No, they're just the Vilmerian crew. But we do get a nice bit of background for new reasons that adds some flesh to the bones of what's been laid out already. Big bit of exposition. It says, on the fourth day, a strong wind began to blow from the east and they raised anchor. The schooner leapt over the waves under only half her canvas, and the crew saw this as a good omen. "They're mindless fools," Moonglum said as they stood clinging to the rigging in the prow. "The time will come when they'll wish they were suffering the cleaner hardships of the boiling sea. This journey, Elric, will benefit none of us, even if the riches of Rilin Krenar are still there." But Elric did not answer. He was lost in strange thoughts. Unusual thoughts for him, for he was remembering his childhood, the mother he had never known, and his father. They had been the last true rulers of the Bright Empire, proud, insouciant, cruel. They had expected him, perhaps because of his strange albinism, to restore the glories of Melniboné. Instead, he had destroyed what had been left of that glory. They, like himself, had had no real place in this new age of the Young Kingdoms, but they had refused to acknowledge it. This journey to the Western continent, to the land of his ancestors, had a peculiar attraction for him. Here no new nations had emerged. The continent had, as far as he knew, remained the same since Rilin Krenar had been abandoned. The jungles would be the jungles his folk had known. The land would be the land that had given birth to his peculiar race, moulded the character of its people with their sombre pleasures, their melancholy arts and their dark delights. Had his ancestors felt this agony of knowledge, this impotence in the face of the understanding that existence had no point, no purpose, no hope? Was this why they had built their civilization in that particular pattern? Why they had disdained the more placid spiritual values of mankind's philosophers? He knew that many of the intellectuals of the Young Kingdoms pitted the powerful folk of Melniboné as mad. But if they had been mad, and if they had imposed a madness upon the world that had lasted 100 centuries, what had made them so? Perhaps the secret did lie in Rilin Krenar, not in any tangible form, but in the ambience created by the dark jungles and the deep old rivers. Perhaps here at last he would be able to feel at one with himself. He ran his fingers through his milk-white hair, and there was a kind of innocent anguish in his crimson eyes. He was the last of his kind, yet he was unlike his kind. Moonglum had been wrong. Elric knew that everything that existed had its opposite. In danger he might find peace, and yet, of course, in peace there was danger. Being an imperfect creature in an imperfect world, he would always know paradox, and that was why, in paradox, there was always a kind of truth. That was why philosophers and soothsayers flourished. In a perfect world there would be no place for them. In an imperfect world the mysteries were always without solution, and that was why there was always a great choice of solutions. It was on the morning of the third day that the coast was sighted, and the schooner steered her way through the sandbanks of the great delta and anchored, at last, at the mouth of the dark and nameless river. Oh, Elric,
What a setup.
You relatable fucker. You relatable. I was never an emo kid, Derek. Were you an emo kid?
No,
No, I was never an emo kid. I was a metalhead. But
Yeah.
even then, I was a teenager, and I still have that teenager inside me. And in many ways, I'm still that teenager, despite the fact that I look like Father Christmas these days. But yeah, it's just a cracking setup for a character.
It's that angst. It's just broad teenage angst.
Yeah, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. And there's a lovely, lovely Moonglum bit at the beginning of chapter 3. It says, evening came and the sun began to set over the black outlines of the massive trees. A rich ancient smell came from the jungle, and through the twilight echoed the cries of strange birds and beasts. Elric was impatient to begin the quest up the river. Sleep, never welcome, was now impossible to achieve. He stood unmoving on the deck, his eyes hardly blinking, his brain barely active, as if expecting something to happen to him. The rays of the sun stained his face and threw black shadows over the deck, and then it was dark and still under the moon and in the stars. He wanted the jungle to absorb him. He wanted to be one with the trees and the shrubs and the creeping beasts. He wanted thought to disappear. He drew the heavily scented air into his lungs, as if that alone would make him become what, at that moment, he desired to be. The drone of insects became a murmuring voice that called him into the heart of the old, old forest, and yet he could not move, could not answer. And at length Moonglum came up on deck and touched his shoulder and said something, and passively he went below to his bunk and wrapped himself in his cloak and lay there, still listening to the voice of the jungle. That is such a fucking brilliant Moonglum bit. I love it. Just no dialogue, just a hint of how deep Moonglum's relationship with and understanding of Elric is. Absolute magic. Love it. Everybody needs a Moonglum, don't they?
Everybody needs a Moonglum.
And that's why I don't think this works with Smeog and Baldhead.
No.
at all. Because Smjorgen has not earned that. You know, I was tempted to, because it's fairly short, to take a look at the Sailing to the Future, whatever it's called in Sailing on the Seas of Fate. But I thought, no, we'll leave that because we will cover Sailing on the Seas of Fate at some point. Hopefully in 2026 we'll get to that and we'll take a look at some of the differences, because there are a few little bits and pieces that I think not only the beginning and end would have to be changed to fit it in to that narrative, but there's a couple of bits along the way in the story that would make no sense if they were left as they are within the context of Sailing on the Seas of Fate. But, you know, that's for another time. We're doing the Jade Man's Eyes, and let's stick with the Jade Man's Eyes. It's a good chapter, this, because to proceed upstream, Mike channels some Edgar Rice Burroughs with his jungle descriptions. Evan is pretty introspect too, but as the ship proceeds, Elric's mood starts to lift slightly, something that isn't lost on Astran. And Elric's making Astran quite unsettled now, because Astran realises there's something not quite right about Elric's response to everything. But a couple of days in, and of course we are 26 odd pages in, it's a Moorcock book, it's a fantasy book, it's a sword and sorcery book. We've got to have some action. So it all goes apocalypse now.
Calling the goons, you gotta.
Yeah. It all goes apocalypse now as the schooners sailing up the river, attacked from both banks by whistling discs of crystal, cutting down and beheading unfortunate Vilmerian sailors. They have a really bad time, these poor sailors. And a moment's respite, then the attackers reveal themselves, and Mike, at this point, has had at least 4 rolls on the random creature constructor here. At least 4. Because, how are they described? The things were essentially reptilian, but with feathery crests and neck wattles, though their faces were almost human. Their forelegs were like the arms and hands of men, but their hind legs were incredibly long and stork-like. Balanced on these legs, their bodies towered over the water. They carried great war clubs in which slits had been cut, and doubtless these were that they used to hurl the crystalline discs. So awful sentence that. Hard to read. Staring at their faces, Elric was horrified. In some subtle way, they reminded him of the characteristic faces of his own folk, the folk of Melniboné. Were these creatures his cousins, or were they a species from which his people had evolved? He stopped asking the questions as an intense hatred for the creatures filled him. They were obscene. The sight of them brought bile into his throat. Without thinking, he drew Stormbringer from its sheath. The black sword began to howl, and the familiar black radiance spilled from it. The runes carved into its blade pulsed a vivid scarlet, which turned slowly to a deep purple, and then to black once more. The creatures were wading through the water on their stilt-like legs, and they paused when they saw the sword, glancing at one another. They were not the only ones unnerved by the sight, for Duke Avon and his men paled too. "Gods!" Avon yelled. "I know not which I prefer the look of, those who attack us, or that which defends us." "Stay well away from that sword," Moonglam warned. "It has the habit of killing those its master likes best." Foreshadowing. That's always foreshadowing in an Elric story, isn't it? Oh dear, oh dear. The fight goes badly, though. Even Stormbringer doesn't fare that well. Meanwhile, the crew are getting butchered, so Duke Avon beseeches Elric to summon supernatural aid. And Elric goes, oh yeah, good idea. And he summons... Right, who does he summon? Derek, tell me.
I don't remember his name. The bug god.
The patron lord of all insects, Nurk. Yeah. To be fair, there have been worse ones. Yeah, let's just call him just Nurk. There have been worse ones, but 2 N's, 3 U's, 4 R's, apostrophe C, apostrophe C. Yeah, good lord. But there have been worse ones. Their exchange is quite amusing. I love the exchange because it's all very pretentious, because really what they're saying is Nurk is saying, what? Why me? Ariok. Oh, Ariok's fickle.
Like, what do you want? Oh,
yeah. Oh, so Ariok's fickle. So you're giving me a ring.
All right.
All right then. But this is the one and only time. But in the exchange, it's all canst and dost thou and thy wilt and thine own. And Elric kind of slips into this super archaic and cheesy way of speaking. It's really funny. But a massive cloud of funky dragonflies intervenes and fucks up the baddies, and the last few disappear into the jungle. And then there's a couple of observations that are made, one in particular from Moonglam. It says, on their peculiar legs, a dozen or more of the reptiles were fleeing into the jungle, having witnessed the fate of their comrades. Now the huge dragonflies were rising into the air again, and Evan turned away as he glimpsed what they had left behind. "By the gods, you work fierce sorcery, Prince Elric." "Ugh!" Elric smiled and shrugged. It is effective, Duke Avon. He sheathed his rune sword. It seemed reluctant to enter the scabbard, and it moaned as if in resentment. Moonglum glanced at it. That blade will want a feast soon, Elric, whether you desire it or not. Doubtless it will find something to feed on in the forest, said the albino. He stepped over a piece of broken mast and went below. Moonglum looked at the dew scum on the surface of the water and shuddered. Yeah, Moonglum knows what's up. He's a top geezer, and he knows what's up. But the schooner's fucked. After leaving some of the surviving crew to attempt repairs, Evan, Elric, and Moonglum, plus 6 other unnamed crewmen, head inland on foot to find Rlin Clen. And it's all a bit weird and unsettling. But once again, Evan is mostly unsettled by Elric. Good call, Evan, old chum. But for days they move slowly through the jungle, encountering no animal life. But Elric recalls the tales that suggest that all of the people of Rlin Cren fled the city, as did all the animals, when the gods met there, because none dared overhear the voices of the lords of the higher plains. Shortly after, crew member spots a grey man in the trees and loses an arrow, and they do come upon the city. So 4 chapters in, a remarkable amount of stuff has happened in a very, very short passage of time when you're reading this. I know we talk about this all the time, but Elric really knows how to do a 70-page, quick sword and sorcery quest with a bit of violence and a bit of characterisation and some interesting characters and establishing a sense of doom, because you know it's all going to go shit-shaped for everybody but Elric and Moonglum at the end of the day. For now, at least. For now, Moonglum is safe. But, yeah. Unfortunately, Elric thinks a lot of this is pretty hilarious, because it says, nothing grew among the ruins of the city. The streets were broken and the walls of the houses have fallen. But there were no weeds flowering in the cracks, and it seemed that the city had but recently been brought down by an earthquake. Only one thing still stood intact, towering over the ruins. It was a gigantic statue of white, grey, and green jade. The statue of a naked youth, with a face of almost feminine beauty that turned sightless eyes towards the north. The eyes, Duke Avon said. They're gone. The others said nothing as they stared at the statue and the ruins surrounding it. The area was relatively small, and the buildings had had little decoration. The inhabitants seemed to have been a simple, well-to-do folk, totally unlike the Melnibonéans of the Bright Empire. Elric could not believe that the people of Rlin Krenar had been his ancestors. They had been too sane. The statue has already been looted, Duke Avon continued. Our damned journey's been in vain. Elric laughed. Did you really think you would be able to prise the Jade Man's eyes from their sockets, my lord? The statue was as tall as any tower of the Dreaming City, and the head alone must have been the size of a reasonably large building. Duke Avon pursed his lips and refused to listen to Elric's mocking voice. We may yet find the journey worth our while, he said. There were other treasures in Rlin Krenar. Come. Evan is still determined to find some kind of treasure, but the lizard stalk monster dudes are back and the poor Valmerians are getting beheaded again. It's all going off. So, what does a Moorcock character need when the shit's hitting the fan? Supernatural aid. For the second time in about 8 pages, Elric is throwing his sword in the air and summoning supernatural aid. Now, Elric and his summoning abilities. Does it paradoxically take some of the magic away from these stories when there's a handy out available so often? It's quite a strange one, isn't it? I think it's quite unique in sword and sorcery that you've got a protagonist who isn't just overcoming shenanigans with skill and cunning,
and it's
like
such,
Lieber and
it's
Howard
such a
style.
Powerful thing to summon as well. You know, it's not just like, say in another story, the character can just like somehow muster like berserker strength for a little bit or something along those lines, right? And then they pay some sort of tax and are tired after. This he can just summon. I don't know. It's just such a huge, easy out.
It's weird, isn't it? Because if you look at all of his protagonists, Coram has got all his toys. Hawkmoon spends 3 books doing quests to gather his toys.
Right.
Elric's got Stormbringer, and he can summon demons and elementals whenever the plot allows. Ericos has the Black Sword. But it's a common theme with all of the Moorcock protagonists that they don't rely on skill, knowledge, or cunning. They have magic tricks. They're overpowered characters with overpowered magic items. Yeah. But for whatever reason, it doesn't seem to matter. You know, it doesn't, because the characters have got enough else about, well, with a possible exception of Hawkmoon, the characters have got enough else about them to carry that through. And the threats that they actually face are so weird and outlandish and powerful that, I don't know, it still seems to work. And at the end of the day, if we want to read about somebody overcoming these shenanigans of skill and cunning, well, Lieber and Howard are right there, aren't they? They're available for us. Yeah, here we are. We're reading this again. And the other thing is, the exchanges with Arioch are always fun.
Yeah.
Do you want to get into a bit of a read?
Yeah, let's do it.
Do you want to be Arioch or Elric?
I'll be Arioch.
He drew Stormbringer and raised it, facing the Jade statue. Arioch, he cried. Arioch, aid me! Black light burst from the blade and began to sing as if joining in Elric's incantation. Arioch! Would the demon come? Of late, the patron of the kings of Melniboné had refused to materialise, claiming that more urgent business called him, business concerning the eternal struggle between law and chaos. Arioch! Sword and man were now wreathed in a palpitating black mist, and Elric's white face was flung back, seeming to writhe as the mist writhed. Arioch, I beg thee to aid me. It is Elric who calls thee. And then a voice reached his ears. It was a soft, purring, reasonable voice. It was a tender voice.
Elric, I am fondest of thee. I love thee more than any other mortal. But aid thee I cannot, not yet.
Then we are doomed to perish here.
Thou canst escape this danger. Flee alone into the forest. Leave the others while thou hast time. Thou hast the destiny to fulfill elsewhere, and elsewhen.
I will not desert them.
Thou art foolish, sweet Elric.
Arioch, since Melniboné's founding thou hast aided her kings. Aid her last king this day.
I cannot dissipate my energies. A great struggle looms, and it would cost me too much to return to... See, now then it was my turn. Yeah. Erlen Krenra, flee now. Thou shalt be saved. Only the others will die.
And then the Duke of Hell had gone. Elric sensed the passing of his presence. He frowned, fingering his belt pouch, trying to recall something he had once heard. Slowly, he resheathed the reluctant sword. Then there was a thump, and Moonglum stood panting before him. Well, is aid on the way? I fear not. Elric shook his head in despair. Once again Arioch refuses me. Once again he speaks of a greater destiny, a need to conserve his strength. Your ancestors could have picked a more tractable demon as their patron. Oh, yeah. I always enjoy the Arioch stuff. There is a reference at one point where someone says, do you think the Jade Man statue could be Arioch? And Elric says, no, it doesn't look like him. Yeah, Arioch has appeared as beautiful child with a feminine face in the past, but I can't remember whether it's post this
I was going to say,
or pre this.
Yeah. I sort of just assumed that it was. Right?
It must be, mustn't it?
Yeah.
Because in The Dreaming City, he appears as like a terrifying mass of darkness and insects or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so maybe it does come after that. This is the problem with never reading it all in narrative chronology. You know, always reading it as it comes. Yes, we still love Moonglum. So the tech's sneaking around and hiding. They're down to just 3 red shirts now, all of whom are even more spooked and nervous, because in a big old building, which contains a partially demolished library of weird metallic spools, there's graffiti on a wall in a version of ancient High Melnibonéan that reads, If thou hast comest to slay me, then thou art welcome. If thou hast come without the means to awaken the Jade Man, then begone. Eric's a bit gutted about the destroyed spools, but they have to flee the reptiles again, and then they head into a strange crystal dome. They see 2 strange crystal domes, and one is like a bonkers hall of mirrors, where it gets all trippy, and Elric loses track of his comrades in there. It says, he turned, and a wall of red brilliance struck his eyes and blinded him. He called out, and his voice was turned into a dismal wail, which mocked him. He tried to move, but he could not tell whether he remained in the same spot or walked a dozen miles. Now there was someone standing a few yards away, seemingly obscured by a screen of multicoloured transparent gems. He stepped forward and made to dash away the screen, but it vanished, and he stopped suddenly. He looked on a face of infinite sorrow, and the face was his own face, save that the man's colouring was normal and his hair was black. What are you? Said Elric thickly. I have had many names. One is Ericos. I have been many men. Perhaps I am all men. But you are like me. I am you. No! The phantom's eyes held tears as it stared in pity at Elric. Do not weep for me, Elric roared. I need no sympathy from you. Perhaps I weep for myself, for I know our fate. And what is that? You would not understand. Tell me. Ask your gods. Elric raised his sword. Fiercely he said, No, I'll have my answer from you. and the phantom faded away. Elric shivered. Now the corridor was populated by 1,000 such phantoms. Each murmured a different name. Each wore different clothes, but each had his face, if not his colouring. So we're getting to that point in Mike's writing as well now, where in the Elric stories in the 60s, which have been part of those fix-up novels, there might have been odd hints or allusions to all this wider cosmology, but I think this is the first time in an Elric story that you get a really, really explicit link to some of this stuff, where in the direction where it's headed more broadly. Of course, we have had one of the all-star team-ups by this point, not the one that takes place in Sailor on the Seas of Fate, which is, the Tower of Veloidian Gognazdiak, is it? But we have had the Vanishing Tower story, which appeared in one of the others. So he's already met Corum and Ericos, I think, by 1973 in an Elric story. But once again, he's putting his foot down a little bit with his stuff and drawing some of these connections together, which he was really doing in earnest in the early 70s, certainly when he wrote Phoenix and Obsidian. So all this stuff is starting to draw a lot of these threads together. Yeah, interesting stuff.
Yes, now I'm more curious to go back and read the altered version of this to see how that...
Yeah, because of course, this would have to change, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Because this comes at the end of Sailor on the Seas of Fate,
right?
Where only 80 pages ago, he's had an all-star team-up and turned into a Megazord with Hawkmoon, Corum, and Ericos. Where, of course, when we did the Vanishing Tower as part of King of the Swords Part 3, their team-up is they link arms and stride across, kicking their boots out.
Skipping around.
Yeah, slightly different. So, yeah, of course, in King of the Swords Part 3 and the Vanishing Tower... But if Mike says he wrote this in the late 60s and it didn't get published
that's right, because
it
didn't get published.
Yeah, so...
This might have been intended... This was supposed to be the first time, right?
Maybe so.
Yeah.
Well, when we cover Sailor on the Seas of Fate, we're going to have to look at this in more detail because, holy hell, it is hard enough getting your head around the chronology of Mike's Eternal Champion stories when you're pretty confident that they were written just before they were published. Right. But when you're getting something published in 73 that might have been written 5 or 6 years earlier or might not, where do you fit it? Where do you fit it? It's pretty tricky. Although, that said, in here... In Flashing Swords 2, in Lynn Carter's introduction to Moorcock, he actually says that this tale belongs between the Singing Citadel and the Stealer of Souls, because that's what Mike told him when he sent him the manuscript. So Stealer of Souls was originally published in 63, and the Singing Citadel... Oh, God. It's so fucking confusing, man. It's so confusing. But anyway, it does seem... It's possible that this could have been the first instance of Elric confronting himself as an aspect of the Eternal Champion.
Yeah.
Who knows? But undoubtedly, this must get rewritten for the version that's in Sailor on the Seas of Fate. It must do. I suppose this is the point of this tale where it does make sense for it to be subsumed into Sailor on the Seas of Fate. But given that he is rejecting this fate or role in the cosmology, which Elric is actively doing here, it has to be altered. We'll see. One day. Hopefully not too soon. Not too soon. Hopefully not too far away, because I've talked to Loz about doing Sail on the Seas of Fate. So if I can ever pin Loz down to an actual date, well, maybe we'll get it done at some point. Although, to be fair, I am recording with Loz next Saturday, but because this I think it'll probably have been out by then, so this won't be any kind of spoiler. But for the birthday special, I had a couple of leads that didn't pan out. So the birthday special this year will be a lazy, drunken quiz again. Sometimes you just got to go with what you can get away with. So we won't be doing sales on the Seas of Fate. I'll be making Loz drink stupid porters.
Excellent.
putting him and Phil and our mate Taylor through a series of stupid quiz questions. But anyway, Avon's there now, freaked out, and they smash their way out into the city square, but they see an ancient vision of it. And the people are of the same race as the Melniboneans, but they seem serene and peaceful, going about the business. They seem quite chill. But they can't actually interact with them, so it must be some kind of vision. But a voice calls them back into the Crystal Dome and guides them a step at a time through the mirror maze, and they emerge in the ruined square to find Moonglum, the last one of the red shirts, we don't know what happened to the other two, and a strange grey naked old man who looks a bit like Elric and has an arrow in his side. And this bloke announces himself as... only 2 apostrophes. three names, two apostrophes. Josui Kareln Rhea. Josui Kareln Rhea. Obviously, anagram of Jerry Cornelius, because Mike likes doing things like that. And the arrow could not kill him, for he is the creature that is doomed to live and has lived for 10,000 years. And recognising Elric as kin, he takes them to his underground digs, and Evan is only really interested in the Jade Man's eyes, and if the reptiles, who we learn are the Orlab, and have only been around for the last 1,000 years or so, nick them. But no, this geezer, Josui Kareln Rhea, explains that the trippy crystal domes, they were the Jade Man's eyes. So this dude, this creature doomed to live, has to have multiple apostrophes in the names. And of course, this being an Elric tale, we're getting to the end. Someone has to pay the price. We're in the last chapter. It's not going to be Moonglum. Not yet, anyway. But it will be everybody else. Everybody dies.
It's always everybody else, and especially whatever new character was just...
That's right, yeah. Yeah. Especially whatever new character who pops up, you think, oh, I quite like this guy. He'd be quite an interesting character to have around. Oh, he's dead.
Yeah.
Oh, he's dead. Stormbringer was jealous or something and didn't like him. But I had to reread this a couple of times because I was trying to get my head around the logic of it. So the old dude, whose name I won't say again.
Just call him Josh.
Yeah. He's cursed, and he's lived there for 10,000 years. And he's cursed that whilst he can speak to the Jade Man, he can't command it. But Elric, being the last of the royal line, can not only...
Well, he can command it, but he can't summon. He can't
summon
bring it to... Yeah.
Right. He can't summon Ariok.
Right.
And right at the very beginning, when Elric views the map and is interested in the map, something we failed to mention and set up and foreshadow, was in the wax seal, there's a small jewel which has an image on it that Elric recognises. So right at the very end, Elric's like, oh yeah, it's an image of Ariok.
There was also that detail that they were lost. Yeah. And then Elric was like, just give me the map and give me the thing. And then the next morning they wake up and by noon the next day, he has them exactly where they need to be.
His smarty pants.
Yeah.
His smarty pants. And he's got an instinct for this. He must have an instinct for all of this. So this means that Elric agrees. In order to allow the old man to die, Elric agrees that he will summon Ariok and, using the jewel, command Ariok to put his being back inside the Jade Man and retrieve his eyes. And once he does that, the old dude can finally die after his 10,000 years of living. Elric does it, pisses off Ariok, and there's some dialogue we'll get with Ariok saying, you sure you want to do this? Well, you've set off a chain of events now, Elric. I'm pretty sure Ariok said this to Elric at least 4 times. Oh, you've set off a chain of events now, Elric. Ah, fate. Oh, destiny. Ah, yeah. This is on you. And then the statue marches off and says, anyway, I've got an appointment with the theocrat of Pantang, who rang me up and wants to have a chat. And off he fucks.
Oh, yeah, he's like, the implication was that he's been waiting to be put into that statue to respond to that call, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's so odd. But of course, what we're skimming over is he's holding Stormbringer aloft in the air, and some disembodied voice that isn't Ariok is saying, oh no, blood sacrifice required. You need to recharge the blood sacrifice. And now it's like, no blood sacrifice. And then Stormbringer kills Duke Evan and the red shirt. It's like, Elric's, no, not again. Moonglum has a look of disgust on his face. It's just like, for fuck's sake, this guy and his sword. But the good thing is, the old dude, Joss, told them of a boat with supplies and treasure on it, which is quite handy.
Convenient, yeah.
Yeah, but the schooner, the rest of the Vilmerians, all dead. So nobody survived except Elric and Moonglum, but they get away on a skiff with loads of treasure, and Moonglum is as pleased as punch.
Well, yeah. There was a weird detail too, like the guy who was doomed to live forever, Josh. He was not forced to live in that city. He could have gone anywhere and lived in eternal, right? That was a weird.
There's a really nice bit at the end though, because he takes Duke. This is brilliant. I fucking love this. He takes Evan Astran's body down to the cellar that Joss has been living in.
Oh yeah, I love this part.
This is amazing. It says, Elric tenderly picked up the body of Duke Avon and went to the opposite side of the square to the underground room where the creature doomed to live had lived out his life for 10,000 years. It seemed so unreal to Elric now, but he knew that it had not been a dream, for the Jade man had gone. His tracks could be seen through the jungle. Whole clumps of trees had been flattened. He reached the place and descended the stairs and laid Duke Avon down on the bed of dried grasses. This is the best bit. Then he took the Duke's dagger and, for want of anything else, dipped it in the Duke's blood and wrote on the wall above the corpse, "This was Duke Avon Astron of Eldhrolmar. He explored the world and brought much knowledge and treasure back to Vilmir, his land. He dreamed and became lost in the dream of another, and so died. He enriched the young kingdoms, and thus encouraged another dream. He died so that the creature doomed to live might die, as he desired, ... How many times did he have to dip that dagger in this poor fucker's blood to be able to write that massive tract?" And then Elric paused. Then he threw down the dagger. He could not justify his own feelings of guilt by composing a high-sounding epitaph for the man he had slain. He stood there, breathing heavily, then once again picked up the dagger. He died because Elric of Melniboné desired a peace and a knowledge that he could never find. He died by the black sword. Which, still, you're still going to have to do several dips to be able to write that on the wall in blood with a dagger. You'd be better off using your finger.
A very long epitaph written in blood.
Yeah, yeah, it's crazy. And what does he do with the first bit of epitaph? Is that like what it was intended to be? It says, wrote on the wall above the corpse, that massive paragraph. So what does he do? Like, cross it out and just write the shorter one underneath? Fucking ass. Love it. But he's not finished there. He's not finished there because outside, in the middle of the square at noon, still lay the lonely body of the last Vilmirian crewman. Nobody had known his name. Nobody felt grief for him or tried to compose an epitaph for him. The dead Vilmirian had died for no high purpose, followed no fabulous dream. Even in death, his body would fulfil no function. On this island, there was no carrion to feed. In the dust of the city, there was no earth to fertilise. Elric came back into the square and saw the body, and for him, for a moment, it symbolised everything that had transpired here and would transpire later. "There is no purpose," he murmured. Perhaps his remote ancestors had, after all, realised that, but had not cared. It had taken the Jade man to make them care, and then go mad in their anguish. The knowledge had caused them to close their minds to much. "Elric!" It was Moonglim returning. Elric looked up. "The Olap dealt with the crew and the ship before they came after us. They're all slain. The boat is destroyed." Elric remembered something the creature doomed to live had told him. "There is another boat," he said, "on the east side of the island." It took them the rest of the day and that night to discover where Joss Unpronounceable had hidden his boat. They pulled it down to the water and inspected it. It was a sturdy boat made of the same strange material they had seen in the library of Rilinkren. Moonglim peered into the lockers and grinned at what he saw there. "Treasure! So we've benefited from this venture after all." "The jewels will not feed us," Elric said. "It's a long journey home." "Home?" "Back to the young kingdoms." Moonglim winked at him. "I saw some cases of provisions among the wreckage of Avon's schooner. We'll sail round the island and pick them up." Elric looked back at the silent forest and a shiver passed through him. He thought of all the hopes he had had on the journey upriver and cursed himself for a fool. There was something of a smile on his face as they cast off, raised the sail and began to move with the current. Moonglim displayed a handful of emeralds. "We are poor no longer, friend Elric." "Aye," said Elric. "Are we not lucky, you and I, Moonglim?" And this time it was Moonglim's turn to shiver. "The end of the Jade Man's eyes. And you know they'll be skint the next time they rock up in another town and another pub, because Elric is a spender.
I feel like I'm being thick about something. What was he hoping to find? Why is he so disappointed? Like, what was that?
The only reason Elric decided to actually pursue with this, because at one point he says to Moonglim, "This adventure is to my tastes." And Moonglim's like, "Oh, no."
It's just there always seemed to be an implication that he knew something.
I think it's purely about...
As the reader, we never learned what it was, why he was pretending to be so disinterested in it, or like...
Yeah, I think once he twigs that Avon Astran isn't just a chancer, and that he got the map from Imrryr, and that it's legit, and that it's got the seal, and it's got the jewel, he realises that there's a chance to get incredible knowledge, and possibly even power from the city, because that's why he's so brutally disappointed when they find the library of strange metallic spools, but they've all been destroyed. And I think that's what he was hoping to obtain. Everything else, it was just purely Elric thinking, you know what, I'm not really into this adventure, but there's just enough there to make me think, all right.
Yeah.
You know, it's not any kind of like burning passion he has for anything, because he's so, what's the expression? He's so ambivalent about so much.
Yeah.
And him journeying around with Moonglum from place to place,
and
making some cash.
He's so self-loathing too. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like that the horror he feels when he like can recognize his own people's face in the OLAB or whatever, and like he just hates what he is so passionately. Like,
yeah. Another one of the interesting things in the text is it says at least once the last of his kind.
right.
And we know he's not the last of the Melnibonéans because some of them appear in Stormbringer, because they're like a travelling company of mercenaries. So there are still Melnibonéans out there. So when he's saying the last of his kind, he means the last of the royal line.
The bloodline, yeah.
Yeah. And this creature doomed to live, he's got enough knowledge about the legends to think that the creature doomed to live may be of the ancient royal line of Melniboné, if it's true.
Right.
If indeed it's actually true. So there's a couple of things. One is there is potentially another survivor of the royal line of Melniboné, albeit a guy who is cursed to live forever. But also there's a potential body of knowledge there which could explain so many things about his people and their background. And I think that's why this is such an interesting story and such an important story, because it does fill in it provides a huge chunk of backstory to the Melnibonéans, and it's quite interesting. I like it a lot. Again, this is like Mike writing right from his sweet spot. It's a perfect pulp adventure to rival Robert E. Howard or any of these other authors, but it's really entertaining interplay between the two companions, clearly establishes their characters and personalities along the way, and that just builds the more of these that you read. There's never any kind of major arc for Moonglum.
No.
But he is such a personality with so few words that I can't help but really think that Moonglum might be, okay, I was about to say favourite companion, but, you know, you've also got William de Verck and quite a few others. But I think between Moonglum and de Verck, these are the two best companions.
Moonglum's my top, my favourite.
Yeah. And I mean, there's Jerry Aconell as well, but I think he comes across more as he's the Ericos of the companions, isn't he? So, yeah. But yeah, this version, I remember reading Sailor on the Seas Affair. I probably haven't read it for 20 years. I've read it a couple of times. The intro with Elric and Moonglum being skint again is always a winner. It's very old school. And yeah, I just can't help thinking that when I read it, him being aboard the ship of fate and having this adventure just by getting dropped off with Count Smeagol, it's a bummer that he had to do that and take Moonglum out of the scenario. Yeah. I mean, I understand why. But even at the time, I remember reading Sailor, and the three distinct stories, this one does feel a bit crowbarred in, beyond the fact that you've got the lore building, you know, and the world building in the background. But yeah, that was the Jade Man's Eyes. What do you think? Conclusions?
Great book. It's not a shit book at all.
No, it isn't. It is a one shit book.
It is.
But it is not a shit book. It's an excellent book. This is a perfect excuse to visit the throne and sit on it for a good 45 minutes and rip through this, because it's a cracking read, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, all that remains is for me to say, I hope you're having a smashing Christmas, because again, this is probably going to come out in between Christmas and New Year. But yeah, so, you know, using our time machine, we're whipping back and forth, and it's all very complicated. But yes, I wish you all the best for your crimble.
You as well.
And we will do Ringworld in the new year when I've got a new reading copy coming in the post. Good. I managed to pick one up for £4.50.
I got to tell you, that was a blast. That book is a blast to read.
Yeah. The other thing as well is because I've got my Larry Niven over my shoulder. I completely forgot about Protector, and I remember reading Protector when I was a kid, and I'd already read Ringworld. And Protector's this really interesting story about an alien probe that enters the solar system, and then there's a big reveal at the end that it's a pack Protector, which are one of the builders of the Ringworld, aren't they? I remember reading it when I was like 14 or 15 and going, no way! What? This is incredible! I was so into Larry Niven at the time, so into his known space books. And, you know, of course, Motor Around God's Eye is amazing as well. But his known space books, I was absolutely addicted to him for quite a while. But I don't think I've read, until I started reading it again, I've not read Ringworld probably for over 30 years. Actually, we're getting into Ringworld, aren't we? We'll have all these conversations when we get to Ringworld. We'll talk about Ringworld Engineers, maybe. And did you read Ringworld Throne and Ringworld Children?
No, but I fully intend to now. I'm gonna.
Ooh. Yeah, not so sure.
Oh, I don't care.
Yeah, I will have to reread them at some point, but I remember reading them at the time because I love Ringworld Engineers. I thought that was fabulous. I've got my copy of Ringworld Engineers up there as well. But yeah, Ringworld Children and Ringworld Throne I found really, really hard work. So I will get back in touch with you and we'll set up a date for maybe late January, early Feb, so I can actually read Ringworld properly, because that might be quite a long one, I suspect. But that is for the new year. So in the meantime, Happy New Year. Thanks for coming along to Derry and Toms to talk about the Jade Man's Eyes.
Absolutely.
Go steady.
Have a good one.
Many thanks to Derek for taking the time to join me in Derry and Toms once again. Derek's pending new release is Carver 4 Mission Report via Shift Control Music. It'll be available on cassette with a very tidy package and extras that will include a download of the archive edition, and it'll be available for download from February the 4th, 2026 via Ampwall. And Derek also remixed a version of Am I in Trouble for band Am I in Trouble on their recent release, The Grey EP. I'll link to both of those in the show notes, and you can find all of their work as Imrryr on Bandcamp and Ampwall. I'll pop in links to those too. And, as we were both sharing our love for Moongloom, we'll play the show out with one of Derek's remixes of their own Moongloom track from the EP, Moongloom. I suspect we will get back to those Flashing Sword volumes before long, and, of course, we'll be doing lots more Elric as we get to them. But in the meantime, thanks as ever to our glorious patrons. First those without tier, Anthony Piconti, Tim Cardos, Dave Dempster, and Sebastian Weetabix. And our Chaos Engineers, Aid von Stort, Andrew Clark, Andrew Cicluna, Andrew Spong, Andrew Van Ness, Anthony Porter, Benjamin Fletcher, Ben Hagar, Brandon Mays, Dan Charnley, Dave F., Dave Griffiths, Dave Voxman, Gabriel Laycock, Harvey Faulkner-Aston, Jim Kirkland, Jim Jupp, John W. Lays, Jules Lawrence, Mal Pertwee, Matt Saltz, Michael Hopwood, Paul McRandall, PJ Cooper, Rex Osseous Nusquam, Scott Butler, Sam Perrins, Steve Braun, and Roger McCarthy, and our crufty jugaderos Adrian Tchaikovsky, Alexander Harris, Chris Sharp, Christian Hundal, James Connell, Graham Holden, Kevin Williams, Liam Turner, Loz, Matt Buckley, Mark Hewlett, Matthew Broom, Murray Palmer, Nick Hopkinson, Urfa Ziv, Sean Twist, Toby White, Taylor Lavery, and, new to the Don Blass, Kathy Rhubarb. An eternal thanks to our patron demons, Action Edmonds, Alistair Davison, Andy Darby, Brian Henderson, David Lee, Derek Clunan, Fred Quiche, Gareth Wilson, Glenn Sawyer, Greg Faulkner, Gwen Barlow, Ian Stead, Janie Stim, Jason Vogel, Joachim Sund, Joe Monty, Johan Hjapper, Jonathan Sharp, Lee Gary, Liam Jones, Marius Latauskas, Mark Hebden, Miles Reed-Labato, Neil Burton, Paul Hillary, Randall Gatlin, Steve Round, Tom Murphy, Tone Malazzo, the OG patron Norman Beresford, and last but of course never least, Robert McMillan. Okay, enough from me and my knackered voice, but don't forget you can follow us on Instagram and Blue Sky with the handle at Breakfast Ruins. You can email us at breakfastruins@outlook.com. The webpage is breakfastintheruins.com. We have our Patreon page too, of course, and there are a few extra odds and sods on there. But until next time, wherever you are in the world, and whatever's going on your turf, because let's face it, 2026 has turned out as a bit of a shit show so far, please take care, stay safe, and we will meet again soon on the Moonbeam Roads.